All right, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about common strategies. So we're looking at this part of the business model. So what strategies, there's not that many if you kind of group them into a few things. I've done a simple grouping. So there's what I call the superstar strategy, the military strategy, blue collar, white collar, entrepreneur, crime, and unemployed. These aren't, I don't want to be in any way judgmental of the strategies. It's just more noticing that these are legitimate strategies that exist in the United States today and in most other societies that I've seen. So if we look at starting with the superstar strategy. Okay, the superstar strategy is when I think I'm going to become, or when I'm trying to become a famous actor, athlete, musician, singer, those type of things. I'm going to a movie star. I'm going to be one of these people who makes a ton of money off of being one of the very, very few at the top. So the biggest issue that you see in this is to be a superstar, you got to be the very, very top because, LeBron James in basketball, I don't know, I think he's making like 300 million or plus, some huge amount of money. And then you look at the person, there's a lot of people in the NBA there's a lot of people there if you look at just like a raw number in terms of hundreds, but then you drop off and as soon as you get into the D League, they're not making hardly any money. They're making, $30,000-$40,000 a year. So if you're if you're the top athlete in your field, great. Serena Williams, right? They make a ton of money. If you're not, that strategy falls apart very quick. So there's a very stark distribution because it's kind of a winner take all. So if you look at that, the issues with that strategy are you gotta have determination. You've gotta have a massive amount of delayed gratification because there's a lot of competition. You're gonna have to work harder than those other people. You're gonna have to put a lot of your resources, a lot of your time's gonna need to go towards that. You're gonna have to probably move yourself to the place where you're going to have the highest success chance. The success chance, I think, in the NFL, if you look at people who play in high school, football in high school to the NFL, it's like 0.7% or something, super low. So people who are playing in those superstar sports, very stark distribution in terms of if you make it, you make it massive, and if you don't, you fall really hard. And there's really not much of a backbone of a support structure, right? Once you don't make it, there's a very hard bottom. And then if you also look at this, if you're a superstar, you usually have a fairly short life cycle. If you're an athlete, you may have 5 to 10 years to really exploit and make as much money as you can, right? LeBron James, unless he's great, but it's more, is he going to be playing into his 50s? Highly unlikely because all these other younger athletes are going to be trying to upend him. So personally, I'm a big Michael Jordan fan, but he played, dominated, but then he had to leave the league. He just got to the point where he got old. So that's where we are with the superstars. The military. So military is an interesting one. Really, you're working for the government, but it has a good side where if you use this strategy, they actually push really hard on a culture. They develop a lot of cultural aspects of you. Personally, I didn't serve in the military. I was very close. I love all of I just love the sheer power of it. Loved the Air Force. Was very tempted to go in there. But the culture of the military, it's discipline, doing hard things. You're waking up early. You're pushing yourself beyond your limits. The amount of growth that the military will put you through is huge. Leadership training, discipline, all those things, they really develop your culture huge. So it can be a really good strategy, especially if you may be a little bit weak on your discipline, weak on some of those areas. It's phenomenal. They also, in the military, they have some great programs where they'll help you out with paying for college, right? I had a friend who he became a medical doctor through the military, so he didn't have to take on all the debt that a normal doctor would do. I think he served, I don't remember how long he had to serve, what the contract is, because it's expensive for the military to put you through, but went through it, didn't end up with the debt, and then came out as a doctor. So the military can be exceptionally, it also develops this social asset that those people who go through the military, you respect them. They've been through an experience, and they are part of the group. They are the veterans. They are the people who have served the country. So very strong there. You also get a lot of the reputation halo effect because you're part of that group. You know, you as an individual, I served. Oh, you're part of that group. You can be depended on. You have discipline. A lot of those pieces. So that can be really good for you. They don't give you a ton of money, but they really build up a really strong culture. Help you, they do help you be healthy. They do give a whole set of abilities. They will train you and teach you. So military can be a phenomenal one. And often you'll see the military one, it's very slow. Like I said, they don't pay you a lot of money in the early parts, but it's a ton of like investing and developing yourself, which can be exceptionally useful. And then you'll see those guys often come out and be exceptional blue collar, white collar, or entrepreneurs. Like they just have that culture and a lot of that discipline, delayed gratification. Those pieces are super strong with the veterans. So moving on to the blue collar. So if you're going to do the blue collar strategy, you don't have to go through as much. You don't have to have as much delayed gratification, right? Because usually a certification takes a year or so. I guess there's an apprenticeship program, but you're earning money. So you don't have to be investing for as long as, say, most of the white collar job. You don't need to get a degree. You're making money and you're getting paid as, becoming an apprentice. So, and I've seen often like the blue collar, people who start in the blue collar, they make phenomenal money. I had a friend who was a welder, number of people, contractors working on the high rises, that type of stuff. They make great money. So there's nothing wrong. It's a great strategy. I think in our society, I currently work with a whole bunch of people who do roofs and contracting. They're on roofs in the middle of August in these crazy conditions. So they're doing something that's exceptionally important for our communities. So that, I think we've demeaned it. Dave Rowe has talked about that, how we need to stop demeaning the blue collar work. It's essential for our economy. And frankly, they're doing great stuff and they make good money. So it's a sad thing that it's been demeaned because it's an essential piece. So things you need for blue collar, you will need a culture of discipline. You don't have to be so long on delayed gratification. It is the one thing with the blue collar that you see is depending on the profession, it can be pretty hard on your health. So most blue collar workers have like a 20-ish year lifespan in that position before they need to move over into either entrepreneur, kind of running the business, or move into something else that's a little less hard on the body. I have a brother-in-law who he's an arborist, and he's kind of gone 20, 25 years now. He has back issues, and it becomes very difficult to do that type of work. So it's a phenomenal thing for society. We need that, and it's a great way to make money, but you need to be aware that strategy doesn't tend to have a full lifetime half-life at our lifetime. It usually has you usually have to switch to a different thing, a different strategy if you go that way. Now, if you look at white collar, if you look at doctors, engineers, lawyers, that type of thing, they tend to have you have to have a lot of delayed gratification. Often they take advanced degrees. So you're sitting there, you usually have some debt that you need to build up. So if you don't start with that and that discipline and stuff already in when you start the programs, it's going to be difficult. You may fail out and then you'll have a lot of debt and wasted time. So that's why there's a side where if you're going to go white collar, you probably want to make sure you have those cultural elements that'll get you there and get you all the way to the degree, because failing out of those positions you so much worse off. That's where I've recommended the military as a way to develop that, and then it becomes really easy to get into that white collar stuff because you have all the necessary stuff. You have the financial resources as well as a lot of the cultural elements that are needed. So white collar also, you tend to also always have to be learning, right? Things change, they change fast. I think I mentioned in a different video, every 5 years, computer programmers are usually learning new languages if they're trying to stay on top of their field. So you're always learning, reading new books, going to conferences. it's like you're constantly on this treadmill of having to learn and push yourself. So that's kind of the white collar thing. The next one is usually a derivative. It's usually a secondary one, right? Entrepreneur. Most people don't do that as their first thing. Like, I just want to be an entrepreneur. Most of the time, they'll come either from a military, blue collar, or white collar area. Some superstars that are successful, they'll become entrepreneurial. Most of the time, they just have a lot of money that they end up investing. So you'll usually see this as a secondary to one of these others, because the entrepreneur, you really need to have a problem. So I've seen a lot of companies, like I mentioned, I worked with a lot of people in roofing and construction. I see a lot of those guys, they get in there, they do it for a while, and then they say, hey, I could do this on my own, so I'm gonna go start my own company, right? You'll see doctors that'll sometimes do that, work in a hospital for a while, and then say, I'm gonna go make my own practice. So usually that's a derivative. Blue collar, like I say, is, again, my brother-in-law, there's a side where he's starting his own business, doing his own thing. So blue collar entrepreneur, white collar entrepreneur, military entrepreneur, really helps though to have a problem set that you already know about. So that's usually why that's a secondary. I went and worked at this company, found out these problems, and then based on those problems, I've created a company that's going to solve them. That's functional. So the next one we have crime, right? It is a functional business model in our society. You can go sell drugs. The authors of Freakonomics talked about the logistics of selling drugs and how that works out. It's kind of an interesting case study. It's a business. It's just like any standard business. You're going to go sell drugs, great. The people at the top are going to make most of the money, and the people at the bottom are going to take most of the risks because of the nature of these criminal activities. There's going to be more risk to your health. They tend not to be as in developing their people, but crime is a legitimate way to survive in society, right? You can't get hired by anyone, and therefore you go into a life of crime. It's a legitimate business model. It works out. And if it fails, let's say you get thrown in prison, you still are getting taken care of. You're still surviving, right? Being in prison, you have food, you have water, you have a shelter over your head. They'll try to train you, they'll get you trained. So there's some elements where even being a crime, even if you get caught as a criminal, it may be better off, than just doing nothing. Especially you'll see that, this crime you see a lot of men get into, and we'll talk about that. That's mostly related to the fact that there's not a real solid unemployed thing for most men. So then let's move on to unemployed. So most cases in our society, if you're an adult, we don't just pay you to do nothing. The government has some programs to try to help people, but hey, if they don't want to use them, we tend not to actually pay them. There are cases with like COVID and stuff where unemployment's been pretty excessive, in my opinion, so you've ended up with cases where people actually don't want to work because they're making more money on unemployment than they would if they worked. That seems a little interesting, but generally being unemployed, if you're going to do that strategy, just being unemployed, it seems like most of the time that works for women who have children, because society wants to pay and support those children and provide housing and those type of things. So usually see women who are going through, single parents that are getting supported by certain social programs, or men that are in the life of crime. It's just kind of how it plays out. I'm not commenting in terms of good, bad. It seems like it's an interesting thing that the system is supporting. However, it just is what it is. So that's kind of the core issue. Oh, there's some interesting relations as well. In a lot of cases, you'll see people who don't make it in superstars, they didn't really develop a lot of other skills because they were so focused on just that limited skill set. So you will see people who were superstars often fall into that crime afterwards, right? They were trying to make it in football, didn't make it with football, and then now crime is really what they perceive as their only option. There could be many others, and that's really where I think there's how do we make sure people are aware of all the options out there for their skills, because it's much better to have them contributing than to have the crime. But that's just kind of a necessary, or not a necessary, often seen relationship where superstars that don't make it, that was their strategy, and then they become criminals. So that is what we'll talk about next time. We'll talk about some of the structures and how those can work.